we're going to be dealing with the topic of handling transition in small groups. And it's very interesting for me. Psychologists say that the biggest stressor in life has to do with the issue of change. Now, if you think about your own life, whether it's moving towns or city, whether it's got to do with changing a job, whether it's got to do with getting married or having kids, that issue of change, it puts a stress on your life. Now, for some and for many, it's a good stress, it's a good change, but it can go the other way as well. And for me, transition, I liken it to a gear change in a car. When a gear change is done well, it adds to the momentum of the vehicle. When it's done badly, it's a bit of a grind, and you can come to a bit of a halt as a result. It's much the same with small groups and transition in small groups. Transition is a necessary. It's important, whether it's planting groups, whether it's because of some natural factors like a leader that's moving to another city, a new leader has to come in. These transitions are there and people need to digest them. But it's the way that these transitions are digested that ultimately results in health or pain for people. I'd like to give a few challenges to transition that I've encountered along the way. The first is resistance. What can often happen is you and I as a leader, we've been thinking through change for many hours, days, weeks, but the people haven't. And when they encounter that transition at first glance, there's immediate resistance often, and that can catch us a little bit by surprise. A second challenge would be when groups are split in half. Maybe there's a big bustling group, and it's very exciting. In your mind, you've said, I'm going to split one group that way, one group that way. But there is this presumption that actually the relationships are just going to continue in the same vein. But it's not like that often. Why? Because these relational lines are being severed apart, and the groups just end up being different. It's different in the new lounge. It's different with a new leader. It can often end up being a little bit starchy to start off with as a new group and a new culture is formed along the way. A third challenge is what I've called presumption. It's acting without faith. It's just presuming that actually it's the same old, just as we transitioned last year, we'll do it again this year, or I've seen it happen before. And we make these leadership steps without faith. We need to remember that faith pleases God, and it's a very important ingredient in bringing about change. A fourth challenge would be poor communication. Again, we can presume that people are just on the same page as us, but if we don't communicate proactively, and we'll look at that in a moment, it can result in pain for people along the way. And then the fifth challenge is the depletion of critical mass. What do I mean by that? In a small group, what we often have, we have those that contribute, we have those that bring food, we have those that are just good, faithful attenders, we have those that maybe they help with lifts. They're just there. They're those that are good at communication, etc., etc. There's potential leaders. When you change a group up, suddenly the first week back, some of that critical mass is not there anymore. There's not the same level of contribution. Not so many people are bringing eats to the table, etc., etc. It's a challenge of transition that needs to be considered when we're making those calls. Let's have a look at just 5 tools that I think are important in handling transition. The first is prayer. For me, the start off of all big decision making, and we're dealing with people's lives, is prayer. It's important for the people that are taking a new path to know that the leaders have weighed and weighted these decisions in prayer. Prayer changes the hand of God. It moves the hand of God, and it's very important in this process. A second tool would be communicating in layers. I think the start off of a transition communication would be not at a public meeting. It needs to be with the new leader first. It would need to be maybe a few weeks before that with some of the opinion leaders in the group. Why? Because they have got influence, and if they are on board with the new change and excited about the change, they'll settle the rest of the group around them. What about considering those that are vulnerable in the process? They might need to have a coffee or a dinner to say, listen, this is what we're doing, particularly if they've tucked into you as a leader and you're asking them to now have faith for a new leader along the way. There's others that you can just give them a phone call and say, this is what we're thinking of doing. We've prayed about it, and they might be very excited along the way. A fourth thing, I think it's important a third thing, to have a look at the public announcement. When you announce it at group time, on a Tuesday night, Wednesday night, whenever it is, that needs to be a declaration of faith we believe God's in this. It's exciting times. This is how we're going to do it. That's the fourth thing. Having a definite process and timeline that says from today, in 4 weeks' time or 6 weeks' time, we're going to have a big celebration and we're going to launch these new leaders. I don't think the timeline should be longer than 6 weeks. It just draws it out. But I think it should be somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks so that within your current group, if you're going into 2 groups, say, you can start establishing separate group cultures in a safe space before guys are launched out. And then the fifth thing, a tool, is at the handover meeting, is to bring in the troops. Bring in some pastors, leaders, others that can help celebrate the moment, because change is ultimately good. The kingdom's advancing, and we do want to stand for that. The moment of the handover meeting needs to be a declaration of faith and victory, and think about that. Make sure there's food, it's generous, and it's exciting.